אדמה ושמיים, חום האש, צליל המים, אני מרגיש זאת בגופי, ברוחי ונשמתי. היה, 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 אדמה ושמיים, חום האש, צליל המים, אני מרגיש זאת בגופי, ברוחי ונשמתי. אדמה ושמיים, חום האש, צליל המים, אני מרגיש זאת בגופי, ברוחי ונשמתי. Heya, 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 ho. Heya, 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 ho. Heya, hey, ah, heya, heya.
A warm welcome and a good evening to everybody attending the webinar tonight, King David's webinar on social exclusion. I want to thank Jackie Freeman, Joanne Brooke, and Dan Stillman for their coordination of tonight's webinar. We're really so appreciative to them. And I'm Rabbi Seeff, the General Director of the King David Schools. In early 2024, King David launched our Call to Be Kind initiative. And the objective of the initiative was to bring kindness to the forefront of our King David community conversations that aim to make kindness visible in all spheres of school life, from tuck shops to classrooms and on the sports fields. And we didn't think we could eradicate bullying and nastiness, but we could try at least to make kindness a bit more pervasive, maybe even, if we're lucky, a little bit cooler. And we've had a lot of success with initiatives ranging from kindness trees, the Clicked Education program, exclusion workshops, kindness notes, guest speakers, assemblies, board games, and codes of kindness in all of our primary school classrooms and more. And I think what we have succeeded in is putting kindness on the agenda, but there's still a long way to go. If I can, and I'll borrow from a cricketing analogy, creating cultures of kindness is a 5-day test and definitely not a T20. It's going to take a long time and a communal effort to truly make lasting change in this arena. And I'm not naive tonight, everybody, to think that you've come here to hear me speak. That's definitely not the case. You came here because despite our efforts, we have a problem. We have a big problem. A problem that is causing anguish to families and children in our schools and schools across the country and beyond, the problem of social exclusion. And we cannot create cultures of kindness if we don't start grappling with and addressing this issue, which has become so critical and so important. You possibly also came, not because of the topic, but because of the guest speaker that we have here tonight, whose viral videos on exclusion over the past few weeks resonated widely and wildly with the South African Jewish community, sparking critical conversations around empathy, leadership, and the roles of parents in shaping kinder communities. And it's an absolute pleasure tonight to welcome Dr. Hanan Bushkin as the guest speaker on our webinar. Welcome, Doc. Dr. Bushkin is a psychologist, a speaker. He's the founder of the Anxiety and Trauma Clinic in Johannesburg with over 2 decades of experience working with children, adolescents, and adults. Dr. Hanan is known for his direct and compassionate approach to psychological resilience and emotional well-being. He consults to schools and corporates and community organizations around South Africa, offering insights that are practical as they are profound. He's also the creator of the anchor-based approach, ABA, a framework designed to make therapeutic principles scalable and accessible. Dr. Bushkin is passionate about helping people build internal strength and that is greater and supersedes the stresses that they face. He's regularly invited to speak on issues affecting modern families, including social exclusion, anxiety, emotional development, and the challenges of parenting in a hyper-connected world. He's renowned for his warm yet firm style, which I can attest to. And Dr. Bushkin combines clinical expertise with deep understanding of human behavior, offering guidance that is rooted in both psychology and lived experience. And it's really a huge pleasure to have Dr. Bushkin tonight. We're going to be in conversation together, going through this topic of exclusion with a number of questions. At the end of the webinar, we will be opening it up to a Q&A. So feel free to post your questions, and we will take a couple of the questions towards the end if we do have time. Also, right at the end, before the Q&A, a number of polls will be popping up. We'd love you to participate in them, answer the polls. It'll give us tremendous insight into exclusion taking part in our community. So Dr. Bushkin, after a very long intro, welcome. Lovely to have you here tonight.
Thank you very much for the wonderful intro. I'm honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing insights and talking about this important topic.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think the question that is really on my mind, and I've grappled with this over the last couple of weeks and months, in fact, as this problem has become more pervasive, is that exclusion's been around forever. I reflect back on my days in school. There were always cliques and there were always groups, but has it gotten worse? Because it feels like it has. What's your opinion on this?
So bullying and exclusion has always been part of the human condition. We form cliques. We generally attach ourselves to kids who are very similar to us in terms of hobbies, in terms of temperament, in terms of personality, in terms of intellect, in terms of sense of humor. But it has become a lot more pervasive these days because of social media. The digital amplification 20 years ago, where exclusion happened face to face, these days it's behind the scenes. It's on your Instagram and it's on social media, and the public is going to view it. So where bullying happened one-on-one, where maybe it was only known to a few of the kids that are doing the bullying, now everybody knows. So it's incredibly humiliating. It's incredibly embarrassing to the child and to the parents. And these days, rumors spread so fast, again, because of social media, and not just rumors, lies as well. So it's so easy to put together a lie on about a particular kid, and before you know it, the whole school and the whole community knows about it. I'm sure you've heard of the term of FOMO, where 20 years ago, maybe it wasn't a thing, but these days, the fear of missing out. Children want to know. They want to get engaged. They want to get information. How do they get the information? Is through social media. And, also, back, 20 years ago, again, if a kid was bullied, he could at least go home and escape a little bit. He can, put on his headphones, listen to music, and really disengage from the hurtful bullying that's happening at school. These days, there's no escape. They come home and they attach themselves to social media, and they are faced with it 24/7. Bullying is cruel because it doesn't just permeate at the school, but it permeates when the kids get home. So it's a 24/7 thing. And lastly, if you also think about it, parents are a lot more removed these days. Again, families I see these days, the kids are watching TV while the parents are on their phone, whilst, answering emails. So the parents are not really engaged with what's going on with the kids, which makes it a lot more difficult for parents to catch on when their kids are being bullied. So bullying has always been a thing. Isolating other kids has always been a thing, but now it's become a lot more hurtful because it's so out there, and it's very difficult, or much more difficult to catch because it's so hidden.
Yeah, completely. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. We see it all the time in the schools, and like you said, there's no escape now. You're back at home and you're being faced with the same exclusion, even in your safe place, even sitting at home in your bedroom. In a sense, you're still being excluded and targeted. But one of the questions and the things that we grapple with as school administrators and school leaders is often, we classify all fighting as bullying. People are very quick to apply the term bullying to every type of uncomfortable social interaction, to a fight, be it physical or be it verbal. I think an important thing to tackle tonight, Doc, is all types of leaving children out called exclusion? In other words, just like not every fight is bullying, is every time a child is left out of something, and every time a child is, and even if they feel bad about it, would we term that, or would, whether that's psychologically, professionally, would we actually term all types of being left out as exclusion?
So it's a very important point, and here's the rule. If you don't define something, then you cannot fix it. Definitions are very important. You know, when you go to the doctor, they diagnose, they define the problem so they can treat it. You go take your car to a mechanic, they define the problem, and therefore they can fix it. You go to the dentist, they diagnose, and then they can fix. If you do not diagnose, if you don't define what exclusion is, then you're running the risk of including everything in it. And even the kids that set healthy boundaries suddenly can be seen as bullies. So you exclude the harmful bullying and you include the healthy boundaries. So what I teach the parents that I see, as well as the kids, I use what I call the 3 color zones of the traffic light system, where we group engagement into green, orange, or red zones. Let's call the green the inclusive leadership, where it's really a pattern of consistent, proactive, and courageous inclusion where your child actively makes space for others. So this is the kind of behavior that you want to see in a leader. You want your child to exhibit the green zone. We see this, and the data shows us that children that exhibit this kind of inclusive behavior become leaders. They are happier, they are much more fulfilled, and it starts at home. If you can encourage your children to show this green zone temperament and personality and behavioral style, oh boy, you've won the race. The orange is also incredibly healthy. This is what we call natural boundaries, where children developmentally or develop appropriate boundaries and expression of personal preference. So they don't have to be friends with everybody, but they feel comfortable in their own skin to not exclude anybody, certainly not in a public way in order to create harm. And what you call the red zone, this is harmful exclusion. This is when you deliberately, or your child deliberately, repeatedly wants to shame another kid by leaving them out. That is unacceptable, that is hurtful, that is not allowed, and parents, schools, other kids should stop doing that. This is, and my hypothesis is not healthy for the kids that are doing it. It's not healthy for the parents that are not watching it. It's not helpful, certainly for the kids that are being excluded. It's a lose, lose, lose proposition. You know, we think for some reason that, you know, if my child excludes another child, they work up the social hierarchy and they become leaders. It's the absolute opposite. The number one reason for anxiety that I see in my practice is when a child is put under social pressure. But when you exclude another child, you actually teach yourself that the social inclusion, exclusion is a game. And what you do, instead of naturally incorporating yourself and dancing through a social dance at the school, you see it as a game. In order for me to win, I have to exclude, which creates incredible amount of pressure for the children, which ultimately leads into anxiety, which is awful.
But just to ask you a bit clearer there, because I think on the orange, it seems then that's the gray zone. Because sometimes, you know, if I'm understanding you correctly, in the orange zone of the natural boundaries, you're going to have kids who are excluding others. They're doing it without intent to harm. And that could be quite clearly, I would imagine, misinterpreted sometimes as being nasty, when in actual fact, it sounds like what you're saying is it could actually be coming from a place of a natural, healthy boundary.
Very much so. As a matter of fact, confidence is about my ability to know what I like, who I am, what I want, and be able to communicate that in a kind way towards others. So it's not about I want to exclude you because you're not a part of my group, but rather I want to I know what I want, I know what my aim is, I know who I am, I know what I want to create, and certain things resonate with me, and they're part of my world, and certain things do not resonate with me, and they're not part of my world. The big differentiator between the orange, the natural boundaries versus the harmful exclusion is the intent and the intention of creating harm in another kid by excluding them in order to create shame or embarrassment. Natural boundaries are very healthy in the development of a child, and I completely encourage it.
It's just an interesting thing, because then again, just to elaborate on this point, is that the child being, you've spoken about those healthy boundaries for, let's call them the excluder. But the child on the receiving end doesn't always actually feel that way, right? They may still very much feel excluded and hurt. So there's a level of healthy boundary coming from the excluder, but the child who's the, so to speak, let's call them the excluded, they still feel equally hurt, whether it was intentional or not.
Right. But you've got to take into account that our job as parents is to really teach our kids how to cope in the real world. And in the real world, we don't shy away from hurt, frustration, disappointment, grief, sadness. That's part and parcel of the human condition. And sometimes you don't play soccer and you don't, in inverted commas, belong in a soccer group. Sometimes you don't play netball and you don't necessarily belong in the netball group. And that is okay. We got to build resiliency in kids to know that they don't have to form part of every single group and be invited to every single social interaction, especially if it's not unique to them. In other words, if I'm part of the social structure, in other words, I'm part of the soccer club and I'm not invited, then that's harmful exclusion. But if I'm not part of your soccer team and you're having a soccer team reunion or soccer team party, then it's okay for me to not be a part of it. And I've got to teach my child that the resiliency is all about managing, not being part of everything, but certainly including myself in those areas and elements of life that I do belong in.
They would probably need, though, then some kind of strong sense of self as well, I would imagine, those children to actually find that peace within themselves, to be able to be that strong, to kind of say, it's okay, I wasn't invited, it's fine, I don't really belong there. It would actually take quite a lot of internal strength, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that parents are incredibly, they're certainly significant in their education and their teaching and the development of their child, in teaching the child what's right, what's wrong, who the child is, what they like, what they don't like. It's very important, self-awareness and self-reflection to know who I am is pivotal. My favorite quote of all time is, if you're not the chess player of your life, you're a pawn in someone else's. If you don't know what you want, you will always live somebody else's dream. You will always live somebody else's wishes. So I'll give the analogy of, if I am driving from Joburg to Cape Town, and that's my goal, I know what I want, I've decided I'm going to Cape Town. If somebody comes along and asks me to get a lift to Durban, the answer is no, because I know what I want. You can come with me to Cape Town, but I'm not going to Durban. But if a person does not know what they want, whether it's a 12-year-old child or an adult, and I don't know where I'm going, and somebody says, can I have a lift to Durban? Well, the answer is, why not? I was going nowhere anyway. And what ends up happening is I wake up 20 years later, and I was everywhere for everyone else. I've satisfied everybody else's needs by my own. It's very important for the schools, for the parents to educate their children in terms of what they want, who they are, because that is the art and science of setting boundaries. If you do not know what you want, if you do not know who you are, it's impossible to set boundaries. You will naturally live out somebody else's wishes and somebody else's dreams.
Very powerful. I may have to come speak to you after this privately, Doc. But you've mentioned now parents a few times in the last couple of answers that you've given me. And, and parents should be involved and parents should help their kids. But often, parents don't always know what's going on in a teenager's life. They don't always open up to them. They're on their phones, as you mentioned before. Do you think parents can play a bigger role in this exclusion issue that the schools are facing and that the kids are facing?
I believe the parents have a significant role. Of course, where do their children learn values and morals, rights and wrongs? The parents should not abdicate that responsibility. The moment you choose to be a parent, you gain the value, but oh boy, you get the responsibility too. The opposite side of value is responsibility. And you take on the responsibility and you teach your kids right from wrong for sure. And if you are acting in a way that you shouldn't model to your kids, what do you think your kids are going to do? They're naturally going to copy paste. And you also reflect to your kids, you're a mirror of what they should be feeling. I usually give the analogy of flying in a plane. Imagine, Rabbi, you and I are at the back of a plane and there's crazy turbulence, things are flying around. We want the captain to come online and tell us that everything is going to be okay, to lead the flight. But imagine we hear the two captains in the cockpit fighting. Or imagine we hear on the mic the captain being frantic, the captain feeling out of control, the captain being angry, the captain being anxious. How do you think we're going to feel at the back of the plane? Obviously, we're going to mirror that and feel the worst or think the worst possible things. And children are no different. We are the captains of their flight. If your children is doing the excluding or being excluded, feeling anxious, feeling unsafe, feeling insecure, feeling uncontained, they turn to us for calibration. They're turning to the captains and going, hey, what's going on with this turbulence? Do I need to exclude? How should I feel when I am excluded? And it's the role of the captains, the parents in the child's lives, to actually calibrate their kids, to make them feel in control that what they're going through is X, or they should change what they're going through, or they need to tweak what they're going through. But the parents need to model healthy behavior. If you as a parent do not model healthy behavior, do not expect your kids to follow suit, because what do children do? They copy paste. So ask yourself, do you have the moral code that you would be proud to have your children follow? Do you have the kind of marriage that you would be proud your kids to have one day? Do you communicate to your partner in a way that you want your children to communicate one day to their partner? Do you treat your kids in a way that you want one day for them to treat their kids? Have self-reflection, because parents play a pivotal, non-negotiable role in their children's education, moral code, and the way that they act and engage with life, for sure.
But again, what if they don't know? What if they don't know what's going on with the exclusion piece? I mean, how, what would you advise there? I'm sure many times parents don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, it happens a lot, especially with social media. A lot of this stuff is hidden. But what I would say is get involved. Create a culture at home when you're speaking to your kids. When we see kids, sometimes kids come into the room and they don't want to talk. And that's fine. We don't force it. I always tell people, other people don't need a lot of what they don't need. They just need a little bit of what they do need. So in other words, if you are hungry and I feed you tons and tons of water, naturally you're going to rebel. You're going to resist. You're going to push me away because it's not what you need. But if I give you a little bit of food, then we're going to be best friends because I gave you a little bit of what you do need. Figure out what your kids need. Create an open channel of communication. So when we see kids and they don't want to talk, we don't force it. We start talking about common denominators. So what do you like? You like soccer? Boom. When they like soccer, the conversation opens up. You like a particular hobby? We talk about that. Wow, the conversations open up. Suddenly the guard comes down. So if parents, to your question, don't know, get involved. Get involved in the school. Get involved with other parents. Get involved, most importantly, in your child's life. Create common denominators. Find out what your kid enjoys to do, what they like to do. What is the thing that they can open up on? Don't force a conversation because nobody's going to open up. And what ultimately happens if you force a conversation, the kids will tell you not what they really need to tell you. They'll tell you what you want to hear, which is not the kind of relationship that you want to have. You want to have an authentic relationship with your kids. And the way to do that is find common denominators. So to answer your question, find those channels where you can have an open conversation about common denominators. Your child likes golf, go and do that. Your child loves ice cream, create a date night or a date day on a Sunday and go and grab ice cream. Your child likes soccer, go and watch soccer with them on TV. Create a common denominator, and I promise you what will happen is your child will open up. You must understand, when a child is in pain, whether it's because they are doing the excluding and therefore they feel anxious, or the child is being excluded and they feel anxious, it will always come up in some way. It's a guarantee. Nobody can fake it forever. So they might be able to push it away, but eventually it comes out. Whether it comes out in little snippets of information, whether it comes out in their diet, whether it comes out in their lack of sleep, whether it comes up in emotional outbursts. And if you are a parent that's involved and aware and engaged with your child, you will pick up on these differences in patterns. And I say it again, it's your responsibility as a parent to be engaging your child's life, and you will pick up on these patterns. And when you do, you dig, you don't leave it alone. So when you picked up that your child is acting strange, acting different, you engage, you connect, and you find out. You do not leave it, you do not sweep it under the carpet. You find out exactly what's going on. It will be revealed to you for sure.
I'd like to maybe just pivot a little bit, because we've been talking about parents, and I hear you loud and clear as a parent myself, of teenagers. When it comes to the schools, though, that's often where the rubber hits the road. And often exclusion can be the most painful, because you arrive at school and you're not in the group and you're being left out, and that's very, very heightened. What can schools do in this regard to deal with exclusion that's happening on the ground every day?
Yeah, so schools definitely take they should take up a massive role, because obviously that is when we see the kids obviously engaged, their social life comes to life, obviously the educational life, and they need to be clear, as I said earlier, clear proactive inclusion policy, definition of what bullying means. There has to be consistent messaging to all the kids. The teachers needs to be educated, the staff members, and there has to be a tone of, it's not just cool to be kind, because that is a non-negotiable. That should be an 11th commandment for sure. But it's unacceptable to be unkind. And it's a little bit different. And therefore, the kids need to know that policies are strict. If you are experiencing harmful bullying, you have the channels to go and approach the teachers, the staff, and the school needs to create that. If you are the child doing the exclusion, you got to know that the system is tough. As I said earlier, our responsibility, whether as parents, is to share with the kids and to teach our kids how the real world works. And the real world works with accountability, rewards, consequences, and rules. And it doesn't just apply to kids, it just applies to everybody. If I cross a red robot at night, there are consequences. If I don't pay my bills, there are consequences. If I do something really well, there are rewards. And we need to teach kids that there are rewards for good behavior, for cool to be kind, and there are consequences for bad behavior. It's non-negotiable, and we have to be strict. Again, the school can also be can create an open communication, a platform such as this, meetings, constant meetings and training with the parents, where the parents can actually verbalize their opinions. They can verbalize their thoughts, they can verbalize their concerns, their challenges, their worries. So if the school can create clear policies, the schools can open up communication with the kids. With the excluded, the excluded know that they have a place to go. With the one doing the excluding, they know that there are strict consequences that will obviously fall upon them once they do the excluding, and clear communication with parents. I feel that once we create that as a starting point, I think that will bode well down the line for sure.
I don't know what it is. If it's just on my screen, there's lots of hearts that have been floating up past yours. So I don't know if that means people are approving of what you're saying, or there's some kind of animation, but agreed 100%. But I think, Doc, something you said before earlier, which resonates with me as well, is that schools also don't always know how to diagnose if it's real exclusion or not. And you mentioned, in the beginning, you had your robot, you had the three, the green, the orange, and the red. And I think almost would be helpful for schools, and you and I had discussed this before, to have frameworks to define what the problem is. It's not just a case of schools being strict and having consequences, which is necessary, but when are those consequences actually required? Because not everything is exclusion as well. Sometimes those healthy boundaries are okay. So schools need a similar framework as we're giving parents to help diagnose what's going on with the kids. Schools need that same framework within their policies.
Very much. Rabbi, one of my favorite terms to use, and I use it too often, is the concept of frameworks. Frameworks are imperative. The Psychology 101, the human brain, its only goal is survival. And the way it ensures survival is that it needs to conserve energy. We call it metabolic energy. So it doesn't want to expand energy. That's why we like habits. We like our comfort zones. We like to stick with what we know, even at the cost of it not being good. We'd like to stick with what we know in comparison to move to something different that might even be better. So, and the best way to conserve energy, to conserve metabolic energy, is to stay in your familiar. And when it comes to frameworks, what it does, it puts the system into autopilot. It requires little energy. So you're going to drive your car from point A to point B, and there's already a framework in place, and it's not difficult for you to get from point A to point B. But imagine I swapped the brakes and the accelerator and the indicator all around. Suddenly, you getting from point A to point B is a bit more challenging, because now your brain has to adapt to something that is unfamiliar to you. When we can create frameworks, blueprints, methods, clear policies, that makes people feel secure. It makes people feel safe, both parents and children and staff and teachers and social workers. It's the framework that allows you to remain in control. Now, and we spoke about this before, people think resiliency is all about my internal, let's call it willingness or intellect in managing life. It's not true. Resiliency is all about, do I have a framework that's more robust than the stressor that's in front of me? So the analogy that I usually give is, imagine I make you do a 50-piece puzzle. Your first step, everybody says, well, corners and edges, fine. What if I give you a 100-piece puzzle? Well, the framework is corners and edges. And 500-piece puzzle and a 1,000-piece puzzle, same, corners and edges. The framework stays the same. It's the framework that allows you to remain in control. Again, that's why you get people that have 1,000 pieces in front of them and they feel in control. Other people have 10 pieces in front of them and they're falling apart. Because in control has got nothing to do with your intellect or your willingness to manage life. It's got to do with, do I have a framework to manage the situation that's in front of me? And if we can create frameworks that are more robust than the stressor or the threat for the kids, for the parents, for the schools, we'll build resiliency.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. Maybe in conclusion, because we kind of coming to the end, we want to move to some Q&As as well. And you advocate for parents to teach, as you said in the beginning, to teach the kids to become leaders, to become more inclusive. So number one, I suppose a two-part question: how do parents advocate for kids to become leaders like that? And question part two: is there a danger or something to be said for kids who become too kind? Like, is there a problem sometimes in being too kind? Could they come back to bite you and come back to harm the child? So again, I suppose question one is, how do parents create those inclusive leaders, as you mentioned right in the beginning? And number two, how far do you go with making your kid the kind kid? And is there potentially some kind of negative rebound from that?
Right. So to how parents can instill this kind of leadership mentality, I tell my kids, I teach both my kids, we speak about it on a daily basis, LBK, which stands for leadership, bravery, and kindness. I instill it in them, and this is important, not through what we tell them, because kids don't care about what you say, they care about what you show them. We learn not intellectually, we learn experientially. And if you're the kind of parent that's going to give them a drosha every day about how to be a leader, how to be brave, how to be kind, but you don't show it yourself, it doesn't stick. You can wish all you want, it just doesn't stick. You got to actually show it, so you got to express it. With regards to reinforcing this, again, you got to do this on a daily basis, and you got to show, you got to be that kind of character. If you need to grow as a parent, if you need to learn, then you do it. Again, you take responsibility. What was your second question?
Sorry, the second question was about, can kids be too kind? Sometimes, and especially now in the school context, there's always the good kid, and you try to push them to become, be kinder and just include that person. And there's people in our system who call it the curse of the mitzvah meidel. The person who's like just too kind. Like, is there a boundary or a point at which actually that kid has to be told to stop being kind?
Right. So, Rabbi, I don't believe anybody can be too kind. I think kindness needs to be the foundation of everything that we do. We can be honest and kind, and we can be scared and kind, and we can be direct and kind. I think kindness is the foundation. What can happen, and I tell parents and kids, that unconditional giving creates and breeds and attracts unconditional taking. So I do believe in the ill health of being an unconditional giver. If you're going to be an unconditional giver, you're going to create a dynamic where you're going to be abused. It happens with children, it happens with adults. You have to be conditional, and it's only a natural dynamic for me to engage in a conversation or be in a relationship where I give, but the other person gives back. And if they stop giving back, then I'm no longer interested in giving, and I'm going to give to someone that is going to give back. So I don't believe in too kind. can be harmful. I believe in being an unconditional giver being harmful without expecting anything in return. So of course, we'd like to think that we give without expectation, but the reality that creates a sense of injustice, that creates a sense of resentment, that creates a sense of, I don't want to be a part of this game where I give and give and give, and you just take and take and take. So I don't believe that you can be too kind, but I do believe you can be an unconditional giver, which actually can be very, very harmful to you. And you've got to learn to set the boundaries. And that, as I said earlier, comes with self-knowledge.
But a kid could be kind, and we're encouraging to be that leader, but they can also say no. They can also, there's a
Very
point at
much
which
so.
they can turn around and say, listen, I'm giving it unconditionally, but this doesn't suit me right now. And I think maybe we shouldn't see each other Saturday night, and maybe we should split our ways, and almost kind of really put those boundaries in place.
Very much. But to put those boundaries in place, you've got to know yourself well enough to go, I've reached my limit. I need me time. I've reached my limit. I need to do X, Y, and Z. I want to get from point A to point B. And this person doesn't serve me. It doesn't make them bad. It doesn't make them nasty, but I don't want to engage with that person. And I know myself well enough to know that I shouldn't be investing my time and energy into that person. I'd rather be investing my time and energy into other things.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Doc. I think what we're going to do now, we've gone half an hour, and we're going to open it up to the Q&A. But before that, we're going to have a slight pause. There's going to be 3 questions coming up on a poll. The polls are anonymous, so your names won't be shared, but please feel free to answer these. We're just interested in we've got a very large crowd here tonight on the webinar. We're very interested in your thoughts. You can see the questions popping up now, so feel free, please, to take a minute to fill them in while we get the questions ready for the Q&A. Dan, have we moved on to the second question there? I think let's keep those polls coming. Has your child been excluded in the last 12 months? Yes or no? Okay, and the last question, I believe. Dan, have we done all 3? I might have missed one. Okay.
No, third one's coming now.
Third one's coming up now. Has your child excluded others in the last 12 months? Are you a parent of someone who's excluded and not been excluded? All right, everybody. Thank you so much for participating in those polls. Really appreciate it. So we've got some questions that have come through now, Doc, and I think some very interesting ones, both I think for you and for me. The first question is, how can we deal with parents who allow their child to exclude others in a harmful way? So I think this is coming from a parent perspective. How do you deal with other parents when you feel that your child's been excluded in a harmful way? Uninviting them to parties or bar mitzvahs, not including them. So how do parents deal with other parents when that seems to be happening?
So obviously you assess the dynamic of your relationship with the other parent. And I'll get to that in a second. I just want to re-highlight something. The parent that is involved in the exclusion, that thinks it's okay because they're building their child's maybe status in the hierarchy, and they think that it makes their child better. As I said earlier, it doesn't make your child better. And it actually erodes also your relationship with your own child. Because if you allow your child to do the exclusion, it just erodes your own moral authority, and you just model just terrible behavior for your child. And as I've explained, your children learn from copying, pasting. You ultimately are also damaging your trust that your child has in you, because now you're actually teaching your child that relationships are conditional. In other words, you're only accepted if you exclude. So if your parent is okay with having a conditional relationship, you're only okay if you exclude. How do you expect your child to live anxiety-free, knowing that they have a relationship with a parent that is conditional in their approach with you? So it erodes the relationship. So you should not exclude as a parent. It doesn't serve the child, it doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve the relationship between you and the child. So as I was saying, you assess the dynamic between you and the other parent. If you are close, obviously you give yourself permission to confront the parent themselves and go, listen, this might have been an honest mistake. This is what's happened. Now we're in the red zone. I feel my child is being excluded, harmfully so. Can we address it? Now, the more removed the other parent is from your social circle and your social trust, the more you can interact maybe indirectly, whether it's the school, whether it's a mutual parent, or maybe a mutual friend that can confront the parent. The last approach is get your child to build resiliency themselves and maybe confront the other child. Maybe the child can confront the teachers or approach the school. So if you cannot, as a parent, confront the other parent, you do it indirectly through the school, through a mutual friend, through a mutual contact. And if not, you get your child, obviously where appropriate, to confront it, whether it's teaching the child resiliency through confronting the other kid, or the child bring it up at the school so the teachers of the school can take the pressure off the child.
There's another question here, which is quite similar, but maybe more nuanced and maybe a bit harder, is what do you do as a parent if your child's friend group is excluding them? I mean, from my experience and even recent conversations I've had with some children who've been excluded, sometimes you don't want to address it for fear of making the matters worse. So now you've got a child, they're in a friend group, the friend group is excluding them. So the child doesn't want to tackle it because that might make it worse. The parent doesn't want to tackle it necessarily because for the same reason. And I think that's often the conflict that parents and schools have, is how much do you get involved? Will you make it worse or will you make it better? So what would you advise to a parent who's seeing their child's friend group exclude them?
So again, it depends on how close your child is to the dynamic of the group and how close you are to the parents. Again, the closer they are, and the more apparent and expressive the exclusion is, the more you should be addressing it. We can't be leaving a child being bullied unattended because it can cause harm to the child. So again, you encourage the child, depending on the age, depending on the situation, depending on the dynamic, depending on the closeness, to address it. As a parent, you can address it yourself, directly or indirectly, or you encourage a child to approach the group if that's possible. Now, in the case where it's not possible, maybe you're embarrassed, maybe your child is a little bit worried that it might create even more harm than good by addressing it, they might be excluded even more, then you want to encourage your child to build resiliency. I call this, and this is very important, I call this the chin down versus the chin up approach. You never allow the child to take the position of a victim, ever. The chin down is looking down and going, what's wrong with me? The chin up is, what can I do about it? Now, obviously, you want the child to look up and go, what can I do about it? And can I bring myself back into the group? Can I incorporate myself back in the group? Do I need to do anything different? Maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I need to correct and self-reflect on maybe there are reasons for me not being included. Now, if there's none of that, and in the worst case scenario, or a case scenario where the child is being excluded and they cannot do anything about it, they're just being bullied, then I would encourage the child to look for other friends. I always tell people, go where you are celebrated, not where you are tolerated. So you don't want to be a part of a group that doesn't want you. You want to be a part of a group that accepts you, that loves you, that is able to celebrate who you are and your strengths and your weaknesses. You never want to force a relationship. If you take two puzzle pieces and force it together from two different puzzles, it's going to break. Whenever you force anything, it breaks. So you try fix it, you try confront it, you try make it better, you try to incorporate yourself back in the group. If you cannot do that, then you encourage a child with a chin up to go, what can I do to be in a group that celebrates me, not in a group where I have to force a relationship that tolerates me.
Thank you so much. There's a question here for me, which I think I'll take. A question where a parent has said that unfortunately there's been exclusion and the school has done absolutely nothing about it. almost as if they're the schools saying that they're not prepared to deal with it. So I think I can answer this maybe on multiple levels. Firstly, it's possible that the school didn't deal with something well. And I think as a school, we always have to acknowledge where we may have made a mistake. In my conversations with Dr. Bushkin a number of days ago already, I think it will be very helpful for our schools to start actually engaging and putting these frameworks in for how to handle exclusion situations, because they're often very nuanced and very hard. Often also, children are reluctant for us to get involved in many cases because sometimes they feel it will exacerbate the situation. So I think that's another nuance. And sometimes I think on a third level is sometimes things are done, but parents aren't always necessarily happy about the results. So, there might be, so again, just to say, I think just off the top of my head, number one, the school may not have dealt with something well. And the school has to own that, and we have to make sure we have the right policies in place to ensure that we navigate these situations well. Number two, getting involved sometimes can further complicate and make it worse. And number three, sometimes the school does do things or makes an active decision where the parents still remain unsatisfied because they don't feel it's enough, which is always a complication. But I think, depending on what happened, it's often got very nuanced things that occur. And I think the school has to work with the parents to ensure that we get the best result. Even sometimes the result is not what parents always appreciate or what parents wanted the outcome to be. I think one more here for you, Doc. This is something I think, what do you say to a child who's definitively being excluded, right? So you've just mentioned like the chin up versus the chin down. And I think maybe to answer this and maybe conclude tonight is you mentioned something to me a few days ago about this idea of value attracts value. So now you've got a child who is definitively being excluded. We've decided, we've gone through your framework, it's in the red, they're being excluded, and how do we encourage them and lift them up and make sure that they kind of keep that chin up? Maybe just share with everybody that idea of yours of value meets value and how that can maybe help a child like this.
Yeah, sure. So the way it works, the laws of the universe is you will be attracted and attract person that's on the same value. So 1 will meet a 1, a 5 will meet a 5, a 10 will naturally be attracted to a 10. You want to help the child control what they can. For those who know me, I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl, he was obviously a doctor in the concentration camp. He was an Austrian Holocaust survivor. And in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he tells a story of families families being led into the gas chambers. But on the way that they, even though they knew they were going to die, on the way that they were singing and dancing. And Viktor Frankl said, everything can be taken of a man except the last of all human freedoms, the freedom to choose one's own attitude. The universe can take everything away from you. You can't control that, but what you can always control is your attitude to any given situation, to any given moment. I always encourage children to control what they can, and they can always control their attitude. It's not easy. We're not downplaying how difficult it is. But create value, work on yourself, self-develop, self-respect, self-care. And you as parents, instill that in your kids. Instill in your kids the notion of looking at how I can better myself. Don't allow this moment, this exclusion moment, to define who you are. You must, by the laws of the land, make sure that you use this exclusion experience to make yourself better. You use this moment to level up, to self-develop, to be an incredible version of yourself. Look up, keep on moving forward, increase your value, because that's what you'll attract in return.
You're saying when you living up to that and your value, is out there for everyone to see, you'll attract that in kind. You almost get the same response. You'll attract people who are attracted to you, this confident person who believes in their own value.
Very much. If you are weak and insecure, you'll attract people that naturally want to take advantage of that. You'll attract people on the same level. And when you're strong and secure and confident, in other words, the green leadership role, you'll attract people that love and include and care. And I always tell people, look around you and you'll see a reflection of who you are. If you're surrounded by clowns, you're naturally going to become a clown yourself. So you are an extension of the environment that you're in. And encourage your kids to increase their sense of value, because that is what they'll attract in return.
Amazing. Dr. Bushkin, there are so many questions flying through. We're not going to get to them tonight at all, but I think maybe we'll use them as the basis for a follow-up webinar. There's clearly a lot of questions. We know this is such an emotive issue for parents, for kids, for our communities, for our schools, and we're all grappling with how to deal with it. It definitely has changed, in my opinion. Times have changed. It's far more rife, very painful, but with the right frameworks and with the right guidance, hopefully as a community, we can tackle this together and make sure that our schools and our homes and our worlds are inclusive places of kindness, where a lot of this pain and suffering is actually not experienced by our kids. So just thank you for your insights, your wisdom. It's really greatly appreciated. Thank you to everybody who came tonight, and we're just wishing you a great night ahead. And based on the responses, we clearly will have another webinar. Stay tuned, and we will update you for a date for a future webinar with Dr. Bushkin. Thank you so much, everybody. Good evening. And thanks again to Dan Stillerman, Jackie Freeman, and Joanne Brooke. Good night.
הוא היושב לו אי שם במרומים, הוא הרופא כל חולים, הוא הנותן רוב שמחה לילדים, הוא העושה משפטים. הוא בשמיים והוא היחיד, הוא הגדול הנורא, הוא השומר עלינו מצרה. אלוה שמור עלינו כמו ילדים, שמונה ואל תעזוב, תן לנו אור ושמחת נעורים, תן לנו כוח עוד ועוד. שמור עלינו כמו ילדים, שמונה ואל תעזוב, תן לנו אור ושמחת נעורים, תן לנו גם לאור. מה כבר נותר לנו עוד בימים? מה כבר נותר כל היום? שמש תקווה והמון מבטים, לילה ויום של חלום. הוא בשמיים והוא היחיד, הוא הגדול הנורא, הוא השומר עלינו מצרה. אלוה שמור עלינו כמו ילדים, שמונה ואל תעזוב, תן לנו אור ושמחת נעורים, תן לנו כוח עוד ועוד. שמונה עלינו כמו ילדים, שמונה ואל תעזוב, תן לנו אור ושמחת נעורים, תן לנו גם לאור. שמור עלינו כמו ילדים, שמונה ואל תעזוב, תן לנו אור ושמחת נעורים, תן לנו כוח עוד ועוד.